there's been that big shift where people are starting to appreciate, cultural knowledge a lot more than what it would have been appreciated in the past. So it has gotten bigger over the last 8 years or so, just purely based on the fact that, we're starting to share this information and people are going, oh, well, maybe we should be taking advantage of this.
Welcome to Ecology Matters, a podcast from the Ecological Society of Australia. In each episode, meet a different ecologist, discover what makes them passionate about Australian ecology, what their hopes and fears are for the future of our natural world, and why they think that ecology really does matter.
Yeah, that's when I was hooked.
It's really about pursuing one's curiosity and one's passion.
I wanted to understand more of the mechanisms behind these things.
I could see what I could contribute to make it a better place.
I instantly fell in love with Norfolk.
It's an amazing result to start with and promising leading into our next experiments.
I have to feel it's making a difference.
I often feel like I have the best job in the world.
It's absolutely huge. It's been so wonderful.
We're lucky to have two guests this episode, Merningar woman and Indigenous consultant Shandell Cummings and Dr. Alison Lullfitz from the University of Western Australia. Shandell and Alison work closely with Shandell's family in Noongar Boodja of South Coast Western Australia. Together they explore and map the many linkages between Indigenous and Western ecological knowledge. This work brings together different frameworks of thinking with the shared goal of improving both biodiversity conservation and social wellbeing. Shandell and Alison were awarded the 2021 Bush Heritage Australia Right Way Science Prize.
I was working for an organisation called South Coast NRM, and Ali came on as the Diabet Project Officer, and I was working in the cultural program, and we sort of met there and hit it off really. Like we were quite friendly towards each other and stuff. And then I stopped working there after a while, and so did Ali. And we sort of both progressed into our studies, and we sort of hooked up again through uni. We've pretty much known each other for quite a while, I think. So, yeah.
And we also work with Shandell's whole family almost as well, don't we? So Shandell's mum, Lynette Knapp, is an elder down in this part in Merningar country. So we have been working quite close with her, and Shandell is, her mum's slowly passing a lot of her knowledge and so on across to Shandell. And so I guess we're kind of working in that way as well, almost like intergenerationally, and even done little bits with Shandell's kids now as well. So yeah, it's really nice. It's sort of quite a family affair, really. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about some of those projects that you're working on and why that sort of two-way learning is so important?
The project that Ali and Steve Popper are doing with Mum, looking at that traditional information across country and visiting locations and delving more into the cultural story about that. I think me participating in some of those spaces, but also undertaking that intergenerational knowledge transfer at the same time, means that I'm building up that knowledge base. So the things that Mum can't easily participate in with Ali, I stepped in and do that sort of stuff. So like the presentations, so the ESA, and the TEDx Kinjaling was another example. Just stepping in and helping out with that information, or the cultural side, the cultural view of a particular place or process. I think that's where we've sort of picked up quite strong connections based in that sort of way.
I think Shandell's family is still, they really still live the culture. They get out and they harvest different plants at different times of the year, and they're digging up particular tubers and things like that. So I guess Shandell and her family are really bringing that practical, still practicing this interaction with different different plants such as various acacias or another one called that we've done a lot of work on called yulk or Platysarchy deflexa, which is a tuber that you dig up. So like understanding the influence that, you know, through her family and generations going way, way back have had on this particular plant, being able to bring the science together with just that practical understanding and knowledge about where you would go in the bush to find it, how you actually harvest it when you get there, what you actually do in terms of digging it up, time of the year, how often you would dig it up, understanding that different families would go to different places, and all of that stuff, that really feeds into understanding the ecology of that plant, because that's an interaction that's happened for at least tens of thousands of years. So us working together in this way is really building up that knowledge base of understanding ecosystems that we live amongst better, I think, really. Yeah.
Definitely meets that criteria of two-way sharing, that's for sure.
Yeah, like it's sort of, I guess it kind of plays into that, us just really developing that closeness to plants and other parts of the ecosystem, of really understanding that, thinking of things as thinking of their value, I guess, you know, just an innate value that they have.
And I think you had an example about the Boodja tree as well, and the areas, because it's considered a sacred tree, the areas nearby you would expect them to be relatively undisturbed.
I mean, we're always have been taught, you know, specific things about that particular tree, like not picking the flowers. For us, it's very significant, as you know, we believe that when we die, our spirit goes into that tree, or there's a process that occurs, and we end up with our spirit being in that tree. And so when the flowers come out, it means that for us, we see that as our old people coming back to check on us or check on country, make sure we're doing the right thing on country. So for us, that tree or that species is very significant.
Something else that I learned from Shandell's mum, Annie Lynn, was she talked about Boodja being like, so say if there's like a kangaroo resting under Boodja, then that's kind of at that point while it's resting under there, it's also kind of embodying spirits of, you know, that might be intrinsically linked with that plant and so on. So I guess that kind of understanding really makes you think about how Noongar people manage that country, you know, that just understanding that point, that you wouldn't hunt animals when they're resting under Boodja, you can see that likely that's not a place that would have been kind of in traditional times targeted for hunting of animals, and therefore likely not burned beneath it deliberately, or so there's kind of a whole lot of other actions that just by understanding that one thing, there's a whole lot of actions that you can kind of understand about traditional management of that area and how that has come to contemporary times to be the way it is, I guess. I think, and it's not just archaeological knowledge, it's also just the knowledge that, you know, families, you know, Shandell's family has just within their oral history, you know, that they're passing on from generation to generation. So yeah, and it's sort of when you pull all of that stuff together, you kind of have all of these aha moments of, oh wow, so yeah, you do actually see that plant growing all the time around places such as this. Or yeah, it's quite an extraordinary thing.
Do you feel that appreciation and respect for traditional knowledge is improving, or is it becoming more broadly respected?
When I first started working at South Coast NRM, you know, that was a very, very long time ago, and it was a group that was traditionally developed or came about through a group of farmers that sort of wanted to work together to, you know, look at their land management practices and see how they could make it better, or, you know, look at that sustainability of farming practices. So back then, we're talking 20 years ago, not a lot of that information would have been privy to everybody because Aboriginal people weren't in a position or didn't share a lot of that information. So now, especially with these types of projects that Ali and Mum and that we're all working on, that means we're giving this information to people and helping them to understand it a little bit better. There's been that big shift where people are starting to appreciate, cultural knowledge a lot more than what it would have been appreciated in the past. So I'm hoping that's what's happening.
Yeah, I think so. And, I think just among like conservation scientists and ecologists, I was thinking probably, back when I first started my PhD in 2014, I feel like there's been quite a shift probably just in that period really, where we've gone from, lots of people not even really factoring in that, there's been people in our Australian ecosystems having these interactions and inputs. Humans have just been here. I think that is really changing now, that it's becoming much more in the forefront of conservation scientists' sort of minds of what's the role that people have had in how this plant lives where it lives, or this animal lives where it lives, or whatever it might be, and how can we look to how people have been managing this or for its prospects to be better into the future, or whatever it might be. I think people are a lot more tuned into that than they were even, 8 years ago.
Yeah, way more than, but I think that's also, people are starting to see the work, especially that Mum has done over the last few years with Ali and Steve and at UWA. I think people are starting to see that information now, and people are going, oh, okay, well, that's who we can talk to. And I think that's been a big issue in the past, is that people haven't been aware of who they could talk to, because, different people talk for different countries. So I think that it has it has gotten bigger over the last 8 years or so, just purely based on the fact that, we're starting to share this information and people are going, oh, well, maybe we should be taking advantage of this. For me, I think it's really important. Like this, it's an information that it's not recorded anywhere, and working with elders on country and the younger generation as well, like me, means that information is being collected. As long as there are processes in place that are protecting that knowledge, then I would definitely encourage anybody that has the opportunity to do a similar project to what we've been doing. It would be great to see more projects like this happening across Australia.
I think that we couldn't do the work that we do without having really strong relationships. So really building up, that trust and respect and just relationship that we've been on this journey together. Shandell and her family, and Steve Hopper and myself and our team here at UWA in Albany. Like, I think that's like the sort of work that we're able to do with really getting out and really talking really deeply about different aspects of ecology and culture and so on. Like that doesn't happen overnight. Like it really needs to come from a really, really genuine kind of base and of trust and respect for one another, I think. And we can't exist in this space without those relationships that we have with Shandell and her family, and with other elders that we work with and their families as well. So those relationships between people are really at the core of this sort of work that we do.
Ecology Matters is a podcast by the Ecological Society of Australia, a not-for-profit organisation supporting ecologists and ecological science in Australia. We acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community, We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. To learn more about our work, follow us on social media, visit our website or sign up to our newsletter. You can find links to these in the show notes. This episode was produced by Grace Heathcote and Elodie Comprassi. The theme music is Glow by Scott Buckley. Lastly, thank you to all the ecologists who have taken part in this series and shared their perspectives on why ecology matters.